The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hi, my name is Joy Barrett. I'm the Executive Director with the Granite State Children's Alliance. We operate 5 child advocacy centers here in New Hampshire. And over the years, I've had the privilege of working with some really incredible organizations here in New Hampshire, and it just gives me a great privilege to be able to have this opportunity to talk to executive directors throughout the state about the work that they do. And I want to challenge all of you out there to really think of the word nonprofit in a different way when you start to learn about the organizations in our great state. We have great profits. We are empowering people. We're protecting children. We're preserving our environment. And so I want you to tune in to New Hampshire Cares and really learn a little bit about our nonprofit, our great state of New Hampshire, and the work that we do for people in our community. Today, my guest is Kevin Fusco. He is the Big Brothers Big Sisters new CEO of New Hampshire, which we're so excited to have you part of New Hampshire. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm thrilled to be here, and I want to say I'm thrilled to be your first guest on your first show.
Yes, I am. And what do you think of my set?
I love it. Absolutely spectacular.
The balcony, and it's really beautiful.
You did a great job.
They did. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? We'll certainly get into talking about Big Brothers Big Sisters, because as you know, it's an organization that is really near and dear to my heart. But I want to welcome you to New Hampshire.
Thank you.
And I want to learn a little bit about you, Kevin.
Sure. I have what you would describe as a fairly eclectic career. I literally was raised in a child care center. My parents created a child care center so that in addition to working in education, which they did, they could be close to their children. And at some point, according to my Social Security statement I went on the payroll, I think at age 10. So from 10 through high school, I worked every day in the child care center. Then I went to college and went on to law school and became a litigation attorney, for which I think my parents never quite forgave me, not going into education, which was the family business. But at some point, I became general counsel of a nonprofit out in California that was sort of the offshoot of a failed state agency. And it was designed to help children afford a college education. And about a month after I started there, I was asked to be its chief operating officer. And for me, the most frustrating thing about being a lawyer was giving advice and having it not followed. Although that could be very lucrative for law firms when clients don't follow advice, I found it really frustrating. So the ability to actually help make the decisions is something I jumped at. And then the passion I saw at this nonprofit was really infectious. And so when the time came to move on, I really was torn between going back to law and going back to a nonprofit. And fortunately, before I had to make that decision, I was asked to come back east and help a nonprofit called Jumpstart for Young Children in its national expansion. And they were and are a national mentoring organization working with Head Start.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so I came, and I was really honored to be able to play a small role in helping that organization grow on a national level across the country. And right now, I don't think there's a city where Jumpstart isn't operating.
Wow.
And my parents really chided me because I was right back sort of in the family business.
Sure.
Children's education, youth services, and it felt really at home and very natural. And from then, ironically, I went on to help a fledgling childcare organization get back on its feet and grow in a region. So it had 4 or 5 sites at the time, no real curriculum, no real enthusiasm. And the one thing I learned from the nonprofits was how important that passion was. So I went there, and my focus was passion, curriculum, bringing in great teachers, developing great resources for the staff.
Sure.
And we ended up growing to 20 sites across
Wow.
Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and it was a lot of fun. And subsequently, the ownership of the organization changed, the management changed, and so my wife and I sat down and said, well, so what next?
So your second crossroads, right?
My second
So you had your
crossroads.
first crossroads
Yeah.
with law and then this other opportunity.
Yeah.
And now it probably brings you to this new crossroads, which you just encountered with Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Absolutely. And while I was deciding, I was helping some nonprofits in Massachusetts get back on their feet. I sat on some nonprofit boards. And one night, my wife and I sat down and said, really, we should be focusing, in addition to what you want to do, is to where we want to be. And we both looked at each other and said, New Hampshire.
Ah.
We both love this state. We both have family in this state. And really, now that my three children had graduated college, we really wanted to be here. And so I started looking around, and I was just the luckiest person on earth to find that the 4 agencies in New Hampshire, Big Brothers Big Sisters agencies, were starting to merge, and they were looking for a new CEO. And I had no hope, no expectation, really, of making it in. And I sent in my resume, and before I knew it, I was offered the position. And I think my wife and I took 3.5 seconds to think about it.
Really?
We were just excited to come to New Hampshire, just excited to be part of Big Brothers Big Sisters. When I was at Jumpstart, the importance of mentoring really was driven home. And when I was running the child care centers, the importance of children getting a good start was really driven home.
So all those things are really applicable to where
All
you
of
are
those
now,
things are
right?
applicable.
Really applicable.
Yeah.
And it was probably a really nice Happy New Year for you, because I know that you started probably around January
Yeah,
of
it
this
was
year.
just like the second, third day of January.
So
yeah.
you're at least 90 days on the job.
Just about, yeah.
So what has been the most, inspirational moment for you in those 90 days? I know being a new executive director in an organization myself, there are kind of those moments where you're just so impressed with not only the organization, but obviously the people there. And then, of course, there are those stories to follow. So tell me a little bit about, what was the first thing for you that really kind of impacted you in the role?
So I think the biggest thing for me was I knew how important these programs were for children. There was no doubt in my mind. What I didn't anticipate or expect was the stories from the bigs, the adult mentors, about how profound an impact it was having on their lives. We tend to think in these mentoring programs that the children derive all the benefits, and they derive immense benefits. But the adults as well, the words they use are fulfilled and excited and giving their life meaning.
I get more out of it than I ever thought, right?
Some say I get more out of it than I think I put into it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the littles, the children they're mentoring, would disagree and say, no, we're getting more out of it.
Right.
But to see that enthusiasm, it isn't someone who's grudgingly saying, all right, I'll give back to society. It's someone who is excited and thrilled to be part of that program. And that came as a bit of an eye-opener for me.
Well, really changing the trajectory of a child's life, right?
Absolutely.
And then when you realize that you're gaining as much from the experience as your little is, that's pretty remarkable. And, talk about a win-win there, tell me a little bit about how challenging it is to get volunteers into the organization, and maybe a little of what you've learned about the service delivery as well as the wait lists for children that are out there, just to put it into perspective.
Yeah, I mean, every part of the state has its own challenges. And we're currently serving about 1,300 children. But what I like to point out to people is there are 150,000 single-parent households in this state in New Hampshire. Now, most of those probably have plenty of support, friends and family, but there are those that certainly could benefit from having an adult role model.
Another caring adult.
Absolutely, there's no question about it. So even at serving 1,300, we're not even cracking 1%. And that's in addition to families who have one of the parents in the military who could certainly benefit from an adult mentor, families where someone may be incarcerated and certainly could benefit from an adult mentor. So getting in the mentors is really, really important. There are plenty of children getting in the mentors. And really, the challenge is getting in male mentors. And, for a variety of reasons. So one of the things we want to do in the upcoming months is really focusing on a campaign to bring awareness of how impactful you can be in being a mentor for a child and getting more males involved. And I've talked to board members who are bigs. I've talked to bigs out in the community. I've talked to supporters who are bigs, and they have great stories to tell. And I really want to capture those and get them out there and help draw people to the program.
I think the misconception is that there is a lot of time invested, and although you don't want to minimize that, because certainly you're putting an adult in a child's life, and if you want to make the impact that you need to make, there's a time investment there, right? But the reality is, when you think about it, the time investment isn't as great or as intimidating as most people think that it is. I know I'm a big sister myself, as I have shared with you, and I started in the school-based program, which was I call it the farm team. Start off, where you're having lunch once a week, and we rolled over to the community program, and that might be a nice, angle for people to really kind of dip their toe in the experience.
Absolutely.
Be committed, but kind of give it a try, because I find that the time commitment is not what I even thought it was going to be.
Yeah, so as you pointed out, there are different kinds of programs. We have site-based programs, we have community-based programs. And in the community-based programs, your time investment is a little bit up to you, but I find that the bigs want to spend more time. In the site-based programs, it could be as little as 1 hour a week, 1 hour even every other week.
Right.
But it has a big impact. You may not see it at the time, but if you could jump ahead 10, 15, 20 years, and my story about that is I have a brother-in-law who's the CFO for Express, a large company. He lost his father when he was very young. And, his mother was working to make ends meet, and she worked hard to get him in the Big Brother, Big Sister program. And he had a big, which he attributes in large part for the success he's had in life. Now, he's in his 50s. He's out in Ohio. That's where their offices are. And his big was in Rhode Island. Every time he comes back east, every time he hooks up with his big. They still keep in touch. And since then, he's, in addition to starting off as a little, he's been a big, he's been a board member at other Big Brothers, Big Sisters organizations. So if you can just jump ahead, the difference, your involvement makes, I think most bigs would be astounded.
Right, because we all have role models.
Absolutely.
So, but I think what's really wonderful about Big Brothers, Big Sisters is that we're intentionally placing an adult in a child's life who really needs them. So tell me a little bit about, we have a few minutes left and then we're going to take a break, but tell me a little bit about maybe your role model or your mentor that you might have had that kind of sticks out in your mind.
I think growing up it would have been some of the teachers I've had. Certainly in junior high school and high school, I had a couple of teachers who really took a special interest in me, opened my world in terms of reading and pointing me in different directions in terms of research and learning. And even during lunch period, spending some time to play chess with me or checkers, I had two parents and I had a loving home. But having another adult say, "I think you're special and I'm going to spend time," it meant an awful lot. It really did.
Sure. Well, and it opens your horizons too, right? It kind of gives you an opportunity to see things in a different light. But, well, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break, and we'll come right back with Kevin from Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Thank you.
to New Hampshire Cares. We're here today with Kevin, so thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
It's really wonderful. You know, when we left off, we talked about the crossroads a little bit, about your career, but I think what's really interesting for our audience to know is about the merger that just took place with Big Brothers Big Sisters, which another New Year celebration that we should have. So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, it's an absolutely brilliant thing that, you know, 4 boards, 4 executive directors really had to put together. And kudos to you, because you were one of the executive directors at the time, one of the architects of the merger. But the acknowledgement that trying to run 4 separate nonprofits and trip over each other in terms of fundraising and program delivery and program service areas probably wasn't as effective as it could be. So the 4 organizations coming together, putting aside personal agendas and desires and saying, the children come first, how can we pool our resources, make one organization, have one set of admin costs, and really pour as much into the program as possible. And that all happened basically January 1.
Wow.
You know, I've talked with regional board members, I've talked now with the state board members. It was a lot of work and well worth it. And, you know, one of the lessons from that is, as you know, when the merger talks started, there were 5 Big Brother Big Sister organizations.
Yes.
1 didn't make it to the merger, and you know, if the merger hadn't occurred, there might have been 1 more that wasn't able to sustain itself. So it was a brilliant move, and one that's going to allow Big Brothers Big Sisters to serve this state for a long time to come.
Yeah. We actually, when we started talking about the merger, we talked about it as the big idea.
Yeah.
Was kind of how we were coining the phrase for it, to kind of get people's heads wrapped around it. And I know that, you know, to echo your points, that, you know, we were really collaborating quite a bit as an alliance anyway. We were working on a lot of projects like mentoring children of prisoners together, that this was really the next generation for the organization. And from a sustainability perspective, it was really an important one to undertake. So, you know, it gives me great pleasure, not only to have the chance to meet with you, but to talk about it, because it was something that took a while for us to really get moving along, because as you can imagine, we're also running our stores.
Absolutely.
You know, but really, you know, congratulations, really. And
Thank you.
And they selected really a very wonderful Chief Executive Officer.
That's nice of you to say.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. So tell us a little bit about where are the different offices now, because I know one thing about New Hampshire is we're very parochial.
Yeah.
And so we like to have our offices still feel like there's something in Nashua and there's something in another community. So maybe share with us a little bit.
Sure. We have a location in Keene, in Manchester, and Nashua, and Portsmouth. And we're trying to have the best of all worlds and operate on a state level, but also maintain regional advisory boards and really tap into local support and local funding. So, you know, we're really trying to maximize the benefits of having local offices, but also operating on a statewide basis.
Yeah, it's real smart. And I know the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation is one that really made, you know, a substantial investment.
They did,
in the work.
You know, tremendous foresight on their part. I don't think without their support, the merger probably couldn't have happened.
Sure. And Jane's Trust, I think, was another.
Jane's Trust was another
really
big one that stepped up and said, we're going to help you make this happen.
Now, I know, of course, you know, being on the job, I'll say the 90 days, right? And of course, you probably have a lot of vision for where you want to take the organization. Where do you see Big Brothers Big Sisters in the next 5 years?
So a couple of things. One is it pains me immensely that 5th agency folded before the merger. So right now, we're really not serving northern New Hampshire. That's where that agency was. And so one of the things on the medium-term goal sort of is to get back, get an office up there, start serving, because there's a tremendous need there.
Sure.
And we desperately want to do that. We've gotten together as a group and talked about the big idea. So what's the next big idea? And I think the one that intrigues me the most, the one I think about the most, is getting a campus where we can have a centralized area for trainings, for big and little activities, maybe if it could have a camp component to it. All those things would be absolutely spectacular. You know, one of the challenges bigs have sometimes is just thinking, all right, I love the time I spend with my little, but
what are we going to do?
What are we going to do? So to have a centralized area where we'll provide that support and guidance, and you can, if you know, you've been to enough movies, you've read enough books.
Right,
If it's even possible to read enough books, come here, and there's plenty of activities here.
Right, to have, I remember, in the Nashua office, when I'd have guests in or funders that might come and take a look, when you take a tour of a Big Brother, Big Sister office, it's not like Boys and Girls Club where they can see children.
Yes.
So, we would have a lot of photographs on the wall so that we could demonstrate the matches that we had, but they would have to actually go hang out at a movie theater or go to, Aisha and I, we end up at Chili's all the time, so I should tell you. But, and really kind of have that perspective of what happens during a match activity. It's really hard to articulate to a funder or investor or someone, a volunteer who's really interested.
That's why sometimes some of the site-based programs are great for that. Last week at CCA Global, we had the governor and Mayor Gastis came in to see the program. And of course, with them comes press. And so more and more people get exposed to the program, and more people say, I can do that. That doesn't seem overwhelming. Right. I can devote 1 hour a week, 1 hour every other week, and listen to what a profound difference it makes. I'm hearing it from the littles, from the bigs. So I can spare that time.
Now, you also have some support with some corporate sponsors who provided really kind of a backdrop for a workplace mentoring program. I know Comcast at one point.
Comcast has been a tremendous supporter of ours. And not just in New Hampshire, but for Big Brothers, Big Sisters, I think, across the country where they have sites, they've invited them in. So we actually run a program at Comcast, and we have about 40 batches where they turn over they turn over this great big area in the organization to their employees and say, if you're here, you can be a big, and we'll help with the activities, we'll help with the space, and we bus in the littles from the school so that they can spend time together.
Now, where are you doing that now in New Hampshire? Is it mostly Manchester, probably, or?
There are site-based programs everywhere.
Okay.
We have them at some Boys and Girls Clubs. We have them at some public schools. We have them at Comcast, CCA Global. So we're very open to that model. And as you said, sometimes it's getting that foot in the door. And you know what? As a big, 1 hour every other week is fulfilling, but I want to spend more time. So I'm going to transition as well to the community-based model. Right,
kind of roll over to that program. Well, I would imagine the corporate-based program, too, it's how we talked about win-win before. Well, this is a win-win-win because your employer is basically telling your staff, I value where you want to invest your time, and we're going to actually allow you to have the time to do that because we believe in giving back.
And that, we talked before about unexpected benefits. That was another one I didn't anticipate where, I was sitting down talking to some people at Comcast, and they say, we as an organization benefit from this. And I go, how are you benefiting from it? They said, employee morale goes through the roof. And the employees knowing we care about the community, about the children, about them,
right,
makes for longer lasting, more loyal, more dedicated employees. So the organization, but there are few programs in the world where everybody benefits, and this is one of them. From the littles to the bigs to the sponsors, everybody benefits.
Well, and they can make an investment not only in financial investing in Big Brothers, Big Sisters, but by then obviously giving that volunteer resource, they're almost able to see that measurable impact right there, in essence, especially if the kids are arriving at the campus of Comcast, and people are able to see that that mentoring piece in action.
Yeah, and when they see it in action, then it makes it easier for them to give financially too. It costs roughly $1,200 to make and support a match. So we don't just put two people together. We try and figure out what two people should be together, and then we support them throughout the match. So it's about $1,200 per match. So every $1,200 means another little gets served. So when they see the program firsthand, it's a little easier for them to write those checks.
Yeah. Well, and I know long and strong relationships are what make the difference.
Absolutely.
So, your ability to continue to support. I think what's important about Big Brothers, Big Sisters is it's not a program where, you're enrolled for a year and then we can make room for new matches because you're out of the program. The reality is if we've done our job well or you've done your job well, we're actually continuing those relationships for years and years and years.
And those relationships sometimes last long after the official Big Brother, Big Sister component stops.
Absolutely. Well, your friend you were telling us about,
Yeah. I've talked to bigs now who say, well, yeah, my little has aged out of the program. He's 19, she's 20. we still get together. We still exchange Christmas cards. We still talk to each other on the phone, email, text.
Right. Yeah, it's very impactful. So we talked a little bit about at break, but we talked about another investor in your program, and just yesterday you had the opportunity to be with them, and I guess there was a special event. So
yeah, it's wonderful how many people who you think would be very busy are able to give time back. So Eastern Bank gave us a large grant. We were one of only 2 nonprofits in New Hampshire they gave money to, and they had a little event in Boston. And I went to the event, not knowing what to expect. And Doug Flutie showed up, started handing out signature football so that people can use them, nonprofits could use them as a fundraiser. And then he makes this long pass across the room to someone standing in the balcony, and then the pass gets intercepted by Malcolm Butler.
Oh, wow.
And which made the crowd go
roar.
Roar, absolutely. And they both were the nicest, most humble people you could ever imagine. Here are busy people who have a lot of money and a lot of obligations, who are taking time out of their day to honor nonprofits, help support them, working with Eastern Bank, as so many large organizations are, to make sure money and resources are given back into the community. And it was a wonderful, very uplifting event.
What a great event. Next time you have to ask me to go.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
My wife is still
upset
that I didn't bring her, but I didn't know they were going to be there. Yeah,
next time you got to bring Joy Barrett with you. But it's funny because, again, being an executive director, I know sustainability is something that's really important. I even like to challenge people into the thought of we're not nonprofits. We actually have great profits.
Yeah.
They're just not in money. But money is something that's always, operates. We're businesses,
yes,
in essence. So what I want to ask you is, if you had a money tree in your backyard, and I know you travel around all the different sites, so I'll say you've got maybe one in the Seacoast, one in Keene, one in Nashville, one in Manchester, and money was no object because you had that tree, where would you make investments in your organization, both now and maybe in the future?
So in order to deliver the program, you need some kind of a local presence. And if money were no object, as I said, reopen a site in the North Country. And probably have 3 or 4 other sites that, one of the things we need to make a site work is sort of local support,
Sure.
not only bigs, but also funding. If money were no object and we could just go to an area and say, there's lots of littles, we can get the bigs, and we don't have to worry about pounding the pavement to raise money, more offices. And then, like I said, I think the dream right now, I won't call it a pipe dream, but the dream right now is the Big Brothers Big Sisters campus in New Hampshire.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great vision, to be able to have that and kind of set that as a goal for yourself and move it through.
Yeah.
So hopefully people will hear about some of the vision that you have, and maybe they'll help you plant that tree, right? Yeah. Kind of get it going. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was, obviously you've given quite a bit of thought about Big Brothers Big Sisters. I'm completely impressed with how well you know the organization, again, being only here for a few months, although you worked with children organizations even before this. Obviously, there's a lot on your plate. You have a very big organization that is now newly merged. Where does Kevin do his best thinking? Where do you get to have the chance to have these opportunities to think about the vision of what you want this organization to be? Where do you do that?
So right now, fortunately, and fortunately is going to sound like a funny word in a minute, I'm still living in Foxborough, Mass. So I am commuting either to the Nashville office or the Manchester or Keene or Seacoast. I'm trying to get to them all at least once a week. So on a good day, it's an hour and a half each way.
Sure.
If there's traffic, if there's rain, if it's an accident, it could be 3 hours each way. And I've actually found that time to be almost therapeutic in terms of having time to think, and time to plan my day and time to say, what if? What if money were no object? What if I could get someone to support this endeavor? Lately, we have our big signature fundraisers coming up across the state called Bowl for Kids' Sake.
Bowl for Kids' Sake, yeah.
And that has been preoccupying my time in terms of my drives lately. We have, there'll be 23 of these bowling events from Keene to Portsmouth with
Wow.
New Hampshire, Manchester in there. And
Is it all on the same day?
it's not on the same day.
Okay, good.
People, and you don't have to bowl in all 23 of them.
Oh, good, good.
But it's our signature fundraising event of the year. And so to allow people to participate, not crowd it into one day and have some people say, gee, I would have loved to have done that, but we have it over the course of a week or two, different locations, different areas, different teams, so that anybody who wants to participate can. Absolutely.
Well, I have bowled for Bowl for Kids' Sake, and I have to tell you, it's a fun time.
Yeah.
And bowling is one of those things that you don't think about it when you're not there at the bowling alley. And then you arrive at the bowling alley, and they put the glow lights on, and you've got the funny shoes, and you've got maybe a Bowl for Kids' Sake T-shirt. And it is probably one of the better social events that you could ever pull off, really. It's a ton of fun.
It's a lot of fun, and it helps raise money for the organization. So please feel free to go to our website, BBBSNH.org, to find more information about Bowl for Kids' Sake. You'll have a great time. And like I said, every $1,200 raised, that's another match.
Yeah, and you know, you can't beat that. Let's get that goal going where we have more kids in the program. The other thing that I would love to ask you is a little bit about, especially where male volunteers, you desperately need them in the program. We have a lot of boys certainly on the wait list. You know, tell us a little bit about the enrollment process. You know, what are some of those expectations that if there's somebody that's watching this and says, wow, not only do I have to bowl for them, but, you know, I'm thinking I've got some time on my hands, or, you know, I really would love to get involved with that organization. I've always wanted to do that. You know, what is in store for them in the enrollment process, and how can they get involved? Sure.
So we try and make it as easy as possible. And again, if you go to our website and click on the region you want to operate in, there's plenty of information on the website about how to get involved. But it's as simple as starting to fill out a paper form or an online form. And then there is, of course, a criminal background check.
Sure. Child safety, number one priority.
Absolute number one priority, absolute first priority. And then we don't just take a child and an adult and say, all right, we have two, let's put them together. We have what we call match support specialists. And you know, we have people who are dedicated to, you know, looking into the life of the little, their interests, their personality, looking at the life of the big, through conversation, you know, nothing intrusive, to find out what their interests are, what their personality is like. And they try and make
a match.
Like meaningful matches. And so one of the things you can almost be assured of in participating in the program is getting somebody who's going to be a fit.
So there's an application process, certainly a background check. Again, I think that's where we both agree is child safety number one priority. There's somewhat of an interview.
Yes.
So there's an interview of both the child and the adult.
And the adult.
And then there's someone who's doing some of that profiling to make sure that that match is a good match to make. So it's not first in, first out, so to speak. You match based on, you know, proximity, where they live, maybe, or perhaps some of the interests that they have.
So one of the most important things in a child's life really is consistency.
Sure.
And there's nothing worse than having an adult come into their life and then leaving a month later or 3 months later, especially if the child is already feeling neglected. So yeah, a lot of effort and time is put into making that match to make sure that it's going to be sustainable.
And it could probably take some time, you know, between coming in for your interview and actually being called to say that we think we might have a child that will be your little brother or little sister. And that's probably put in place somewhat deliberately to see, again, your ability to kind of be consistent and stick with the program.
And what is so uplifting about the program are bigs calling and saying, I'm ready, you know, how much longer is this going to take? And we don't want it to be a long, drawn-out process, but, you know, we want to make sure it's a meaningful, sustainable match. But that enthusiasm is just spectacular. My best day is getting yelled at by a big saying, I want a match now.
Right,
you know?
right, exactly. So it's someone that's really passionate about
wanting to help.
That's terrific. So now there's no charge to a volunteer to enroll in Big Brothers
No.
Big Sisters, although I have to say one of my favorite moments was this one volunteer who was a wonderful big brother. He insisted on paying for, like he said, don't I at least pay for my background check or something? You know, people are so willing to give to the organization in a variety of different ways, but there's no charge for the child, certainly, or the volunteer,
No.
which brings an important point, is that if you're providing a service and the customers or the people that you're serving aren't paying for it, what makes up the pie chart, so to speak, for Big Brothers Big Sisters?
So it's really three things. It's grants, and so it's a lot of writing, a lot of submitting, a lot of rejection, and then a lot of acceptance. It's events like Bowl for Kids' Sake and other events we have throughout the year, and then it's the asks. You know, we in the nonprofit world we call it development or we call it fundraising. It's begging. It's going to people who have money or organizations that have money and literally in the best possible way begging and saying, we know you invest in the community. We know you want to invest in the community. Let us show you this program. Let's talk about this program because these dollars are meaningful.
Right.
And you talked earlier about a return. I do like to call it an investment rather than a donation because they are investing and they deserve a return. And the return isn't going to be a dollar return. It's going to be something we can quantify in terms of how a child benefits. I mean, we know from the history of Big Brothers Big Sisters, from the studies being done, that children who go through the program are more likely to get better grades in school, more likely to graduate high school, more likely to go to college, less likely to turn to drugs and alcohol, more likely to have high self-esteem. That's a return.
Those are profits.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Those are profits.
And they're profits that everyone benefits from, the state benefits from. Head Start did a study on dollars being put into early ed programs and what the return is. And they found that every dollar spent on a program like this saves $7 down the road in terms of not having to do drug and alcohol rehab, not having to do literacy training, incarceration. Every dollar spent now saves $7 down the road. Now that's a return. That's an investment.
That is a return. Yeah. Well, again, such a delight to have you on my very first
congratulations.
Show of New Hampshire Cares. I can tell that you really care. Again, so happy to have you in New Hampshire. Make sure you move here quickly.
I'm working on it.
And really, such a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for spending some time with me today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, that concludes our very first episode of New Hampshire Cares. Thanks so much for tuning in, and make sure you catch us next time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.